On December the 16th, 2012, a young woman boarded a bus in Munirka, New Delhi, with a male friend. She was trying to get home from having just watched a movie. What followed in the hours of that night changed countless lives forever. Hers, the young man she was with, the perpetrators, people across India and indeed the world. It certainly changed my life and the group of people who gathered around the idea of creating a production that we have since called Nirbhaya. The name Nirbhaya comes from the pseudonym that was given to Jyoti Singh Pandey, the young woman who was brutally raped for hours on a moving bus in Delhi, who was sexually assaulted with an iron rod so brutally that she died 2 weeks later of her grave injuries. There was something about her courage, something about the way that she fought for her life, and the way she insisted, despite her extraordinarily grave medical condition, on holding the men accountable who had done what they did to her. Her refusal to go down without a fight, her refusal to assume responsibility for what had been done to her. Too often the survivors of sexual violence sit in silence, and this silence implies some kind of shame. If we open up the question of what shame is, it is some kind of an understanding that you are responsible for what happened to you, or that you have to protect yourself or someone else from accountability. A Mumbai-based actress, Purna Jagannathan, reached out to me on the social media network Facebook. She told me that she had seen my work some years previously in New York and was asking me to come to India to create a new work around the incident that had just shocked Delhi and the world. It hardly seemed like a question. I needed to get on the next flight to India. Purna financed both myself and my daughter's visit to India, where we began to workshop around the idea of creating a work culled from the experiences of the survivors of sexual violence themselves. 5 women tell their stories in Nirbhaya. One man and another actress helped to reenact the devastating events of that night, December 16th. We premiered the work in Edinburgh this year at the festival after an incredibly intense creative process. It would have made more sense to open the show the following year, but there is only a small window of time when the streets rise up and people really care about something that is happening in our story-saturated world. Opening this work in Edinburgh is difficult to describe. I had the unique privilege of sitting in the auditorium every day and quietly watching from the back or the sides of the room as the tension slowly built up in the audience and an explosive atmosphere began to build as each audience member began to come to terms with what was being told to them on stage and was perhaps in a very deep dialogue with themselves about their own lives as survivors, as perpetrators, or as silent witnesses of sexual violence. At some point in the run in Edinburgh, we made the decision that the cast should line up outside the hall and greet the audience as they left, because some kind of communing was so necessary. So many people had said to us they didn't know what to do with themselves after the show. And so the cast would line up and the audience would file past, and I would just quietly watch once again from standing against the wall in the corridor. And I would see grown men, young women, mothers with their daughters approach the cast. Some people were silent and simply put their arms around the cast. Others would lean over and whisper in the cast's ears. I don't think there was a single day that we did not have somebody moving up to one of the cast and quietly taking them aside and saying, "I've never spoken about this before, but I myself am a survivor of sexual violence." Watching this each day in Edinburgh convinced me of the extraordinary power of theatre. It's something I've always known, but with the creation of this production, I've never felt more committed to the idea that theatre can indeed change minds, lives, and the world. One of the most important things that we feel is that this production reaches audiences who would usually have no access to the show. The finances of arts are such that those get to witness the art who can afford to, or those get to witness art because the art has reached their society because somebody paid for it. It is an extraordinarily difficult endeavor to get this work to India and to the societies that we feel at this point in time most need to witness this work. In our brainstorming of how to do this, we've decided that the best way is to reach out to people across the world who would feel like we do that the time for change has come. We need help raising funds so that this work can travel to the communities and societies that are waiting, needing, wanting change from deep inside their core. Creating this production, Nirbhaya, was our deepest gesture to ensure that this young woman's life was not taken in vain. She's not somebody we are pretty sure who would have chosen to have suffered the extraordinary experience that she did, but she has become an icon, a catalyst for change. And while that story is out there and the streets have risen in protest, and while the world briefly has given attention to this issue, we want to grab this moment. We want to make sure that this production moves to every society possible so that we can carry its word, and we want you to be a part of that. Nirbhaya is a production that we believe has the capacity to move around the world and begin to change minds and lives. We have seen evidence of this in Edinburgh, and we want nothing more than to simply continue the wave that it has created that first began with the death of Jyoti Singh Pandey. We need help. Theatre is in itself an art that is dictated to by finances, like most things. Sadly, very often, the messages that are most needed will reach these places last, if ever at all. We believe that by mobilizing people around the world who support us in what we are doing, and in this new and growing movement in which we displace shame from the survivor and put it firmly where it belongs with the perpetrator, by the very act of speaking out about what has happened to you. This very gesture is implicit in the production of Nirbhaya, and if we can bring this show to the societies and communities that perhaps would not be able to afford to bring it out, and have the support of a growing movement of people around the world who can help us do this, we believe we can change the world. It sounds like a crazy idea, but as Margaret Mead said, never doubt the capacity of a small group of citizens to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.